All right, Rob, we are ready to begin.
Very good, Sean, Dr. Brown, and the rest of the board. Welcome, everyone. Just so everybody is aware, this is not a Board of Education meeting. This is not a voting meeting, but certainly we have a majority of the board members, I would say, in the room, the virtual room. But this is the annual budget hearing, and so we're here to hear from you, the public. There's not a presentation per se, but I think we're going to be listening, hearing your comments and questions, and we're going to go through as we have in the queue, in the time we have. Certainly have an hour, and we'll go from there. But we'll hear the comments and questions, but then once we get to a point where that slows down a bit, we'll answer. Board members will weigh in. Certainly the staff can weigh in with any answers to questions that anyone may have regarding the budget. And then that is up for approval by the community on June 9th is that last day that ballots can be received by the district. So I'm going to hand it off to Sean, and as per usual, Sean will manage our public comment period, and we'll just start and go from there. And I will mute myself so I am not interfering with the talk.
Great, I believe I'm not muted as well. As Mr. Ainsley said, this is a budget hearing, so our job is to field questions. Folks who are familiar with Zoom can use the raise the hand feature, or feel free to use the chat feature as well. We will keep the chat on as long as we can. So if there are questions or comments from our community, please again use the raise hand feature or the chat feature, and we'll proceed from there. We will continue to give it a couple more minutes as folks enter and think. We do have a question from the chat from Deidre Hay. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Can you please tell me about the part of the budget giving Dr. Brown a $12,000 raise and his secretary $8,000 raise while much needed aides are being cut? Is this true? And if so, why? Another question, folks are, my apologies, I think there's a set. I've changed it so the questions are public in the chat. Folks should feel free to restate their questions. We also have a question from Sophia Lux. Why is the evaluation office getting a $7,000 raise? We're going to continue to field a couple more questions before we have board responses. Board colleagues, does anyone care to, oh, I have another question. Folks can see the chat room. As a teacher, I know the shift to distance learning, many students have found the Chromebooks to not be adequate for the purposes of digital learning. Has there been any thought in the budget process on how we can bolster student technology and possibly get our kids better Chromebooks? We'll give it one more minute, take another question or two before we offer some responses. All right, good folks, my apologies. I'm letting one last board member in. Any responses from our board colleagues? How about we take these in reverse order real quick? Conversations regarding Chromebooks. Dr. Brown, I don't know who on your team can speak to Chromebooks and what we may be planning for IT in the future.
I think I will speak to that one. Yes, the Chromebooks and other devices that we've chosen, that we've leased, have been items that we picked based on student feedback, staff feedback over the years. Yes, we're always constantly looking to get the best tools in the hands of our young people. The innovation and the most important tool is not the actual device, but the actual suite of software. The Google suite, the Google Apps for Education has been the thing we've used the most. And obviously that works best on the Chromebooks. Now, I know Zach Lynn, who's our Chief Information Officer, has newer models he's evaluating right now. And we enter into new lease agreements each year. So Chromebooks that we purchased 4 years ago are going to be quickly going out of service, and the newer improved models are going to be coming in. So yes, like every other piece of technology, the newer models are better, sturdier, but I'll remind folks that the most important thing we're using right now is the actual software. And I don't see us shifting far away from that. But yes, our technologies will get better. And we have in the budget, as we've had in previous years, a line item for our technology leases. And that's something we moved forward with maybe 9 years ago. Instead of making one-time purchases, we were able to move towards a lease agreement. And so with that, we're getting state aid back. It having exponentially increased our buying power. Our technology budget over the years has been reduced because of the ways in which we purchase and the ways in which we support. So, I mean, I've sat in this chair when we've answered questions about technologies, and we are sitting on 2,000 work orders that have not been closed. We are nowhere in that ballpark anymore. On a given day, we may have a dozen that haven't been closed, and that's because of the tools that we purchased and how they're holding up and how our staff are using them. So we think about a lot when we think about the tools we put in the hands of young people. We have an ongoing, continuously improving process to purchase them, and we're always evaluating what could be the best tool to be used.
So there are multiple questions coming into the chat. I'm hoping everyone can see them. Some of them are to me directly, others of them are to everyone. I'm hoping if folks have questions for the chat that they can send them to everyone that's involved. I will speak to Dr. Brown in central office unless any other board member wants to speak to it in a moment. Give me 1 second. A couple other questions that are coming in. We've talked about Chromebooks, talk about the appearance of a 71% cut to transportation service equipment and a 29% cut to health services, supplies, and materials in the budget. How does that track with the fact that we will likely need more buses and bus drivers and more health equipment like thermometers and masks and cleaning supplies for next school year and social proper distancing? I'll send that to the board as well. Another question from Auburn, I'll get it. In general, it would be helpful to hear from the board about how the current budget reflects the needs of the upcoming school year, specifically demand like ongoing distance learning and the need for teacher professional development, and the demands of CDC guidelines for cleanliness of our facilities and increased technology, which has already been asked. Specifically, it's hard to square these needs with the removal of an internal PD program of master educators and the reduction of expenditures of facilities of maintenance and the removal of teacher supplies in the budget. So I'll restate those questions in a minute. Let's get the first question out in regard to Dr. Brown and the salary for some of our central office personnel. Our contracts, not our contracts, because it's not my contract. The contracts for our central office personnel was signed in the summer of 2019. Each of those contracts included a 2.7% pay increase. The contract was not included in last year's budgeting. And so what you're seeing in terms of Dr. Brown's salary specifically is a raise over a 2-year period. So it is roughly a 5.5% increase, but it's 2.75% each year. That's what you see. Those are contracts that were signed and negotiated again in June of 2019 after our last budget cycle. So that's what you're seeing reflected. The board has been having conversations about the salaries of our administrators and doing a good deal of benchmarking across the state, both in terms of school districts of similar size and of similar budgets. And we find those salaries either to be right in the middle or depending on what position, sometimes even on the lower end. I realize that for a number of folks, measuring against people or districts within the Southern Tier provides different data, but we understand that that's a significant concern for folks and something we'll be paying attention to. But it's a contractual raise, and that's what you notice there. I'm happy to have additional conversations with folks, and at any point in time, board colleagues, please feel free to raise those questions as well. In addition to Dr. Brown's raise and the administration support, the district has cut a position in terms of board communication, and we're asking folks to take on additional responsibilities. We're going to be asking that across from a whole host of people, so that's partly why you see a reflection and an increase there as well. So mostly the raises that you see are a reflection of 2 years. It is not a single year raise under no means. And again, happy to have that conversation with there. Any board colleague want to add to that particular piece of information? Great. Questions about the cuts to transportation and or health services equipment and how that may be impacted given the pandemic that we're facing, and that if we have an opening, schools will look different. Board colleagues who would like to speak to that, or Dr. Brown, anybody from your team?
I will ask Mr. Van Kuren to speak to any shifts in transportation and while board members are thinking about how they wish to respond, if so. But I'll also remind folks on the line that oftentimes when looking at the budget presentation document, you're looking at line items. Oftentimes a shift in one line is reflected in another line, particularly as the state changes how, and Amanda's on the line as well, Amanda Verba can speak to this as well, especially as the state shifts how they wish for us to report or account for certain expenditures and revenues. So some of this may be associated with just simple accounting, but Mr. Van Kuren or Amanda, if you wish to speak to any particular shifts with transportation or other items that we're planning for that may be represented in the budget.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. I'll start. Good evening, everyone. I really would like to address the comment regarding whether our our transportation fleet is ready to do what's necessary next year. And we are absolutely confident. We have enough buses, we have enough vehicles to handle the various scenarios. I'd actually like to take just a moment, as I always do when I have a captive audience, to say what we really are always looking for are people willing to become bus drivers. That's our primary issue for next year. We have a number of bus drivers who are just going to retire as they normally do. So finding people who want to drive bus, it is a great career in the district, and we train you, and you'll get your CDL, and always happy to have people. But as far as transportation, the actual buses, we are confident that we have enough of the right kind to handle any scenario next year.
Anything you want to add, Amanda?
Everyone. I'm Amanda Verba. I'm the Chief Operations Officer for the district. Dr. Brown is absolutely correct. A lot of the changes that you see in budgets are really about what's essentially called recoding, right? So what we tried to do with this budget, if you look at sort of the overall changes for the budget within each element themselves, you're going to see that you know, there's increases, especially in transportation in terms of our facilities. I'm looking specifically at the health services line. One of the drivers there was that we actually had to recode the director in that line to another line because we have requirements now due to New York State Transparency Report and ESSA. So that's actually just a movement of a line item from one area to another. There's also, if you notice there, I think there was a comment about the decreases in supplies and materials. One thing that we tried to do this year due to New York State rules around accounting and the way that you can spend money, you actually have to go to the public with money in the equipment lines, and equipment are things that are over a certain amount per item. They're usually higher cost items. It is yet unknown about some of the items and equipment that we're going to require to be able to sanitize and clean our buildings, or even measure temperatures and things like that. So you're going to see throughout the budget that some of those supply and material line items have actually gone down, and we've tried to move those monies into more district level equipment codes. You can move monies out of equipment, but you cannot move monies into equipment. And so we wanted to make sure that we went to the public with, you know, quite robust equipment lines, so that if we needed to purchase those higher cost items, we had the permissions to do so. So that's what you're seeing throughout that budget. If you notice overall, this budget has grown, and really there are not, when you see those negatives, the cuts that we've made or the efficiencies that we've made, we've been really public about. They're not hidden in there. They've been covered all along. They're just usually recodes.
We still had a question that asking board members if they'd like to speak to how the current budget reflects upon our needs for the upcoming school year. I don't know if other board members would like to speak to their beliefs of what the current budget entails.
I'll weigh in just a bit, but certainly Pat weigh in. The budget, as always, we're looking at $136 million and some change, but 70% of that budget is staff, people, and that's always where the predominant focus of our budget is in the staff and people, teachers and supports, and yes, administrators. Administration's again is about 3.5% of the budget, but you know, far and away, our budget is focused on people to deliver that classroom experience to our students in this community and to the kids of this community. And I think probably Dr. Brown and our administrative team is trying to figure out what is that classroom experience going to look like in the 2021 school year. And so that is still in the works. And so we're building a budget that hopefully, with the great staff that we have, the outstanding administration, outstanding teachers, we need that intellectual capital to figure out how are we going to deliver an outstanding experience for our students in perhaps a different way, hopefully a better way, but hopefully, I'm going to say hopefully a third time, with students on campus. And so we're going to have to figure out what that looks like. But this is the budget that we've been working on for 12 months. And at the end of that 12-month period, many things changed. But what will not change is the focus on hiring great people and delivering a great product to the children of this community. Big picture to look at.
Absolutely. Rob, I'll just add two additional things. One was a question about budgets and about buses and our busing renewal cycle. For the past number of years, for well over a decade, we have been on a renewal cycle of replacing our buses every 10 years. In order to find some efficiencies, we have decided to not do our normal 10 bus replacement for this upcoming budget, but of 6 buses, realizing that we may have to start pushing our renewal cycle to 11 or 12 years. That have also included significant research into electric buses. And in fact, as we are doing our capital project at the bus garage, we have run electrical conduit. If there is ever a time that electric buses can handle the hills in the winter of Ithaca, we would much more seriously consider that. And we'll continue to do research around that regard, and other forms of transportation as well. People have said it all the time, Ithaca is a unique district, and we are extremely unique in a number of ways. As a small city school district, we are not required to provide transportation past a certain distance. That is also included with our open enrollment plan. That may come as a surprise to some folks. And so some of the busing that we provide is because we know that it's in the safety and the best interest of our community. And so that changes how we look at transportation as well. There was also a question about reopening, and I know Dr. Brown has been working with some teachers, and they're going to be creating some additional opportunities for our community to be involved in reopening plans. With that being said, as someone who's working at Ithaca College and following that procedure as well, any reopening will be dictated by local health officials, state health officials, the New York State Department of Education, as well as the CDC. And so there'll be a lot of things that we may want to do locally, but will be dictated by a number of other agencies that we have to be in compliance with. Those change every day, those change every week. And so we're making contingency plans, and I imagine that will happen throughout the summer. I think what people are trying to do is get to the end of this school year, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Brown, and then to be able to spend some time focused much more intently on what the possibility of next school year will look like. But I wanted to make sure that I address both of those questions. Other board colleagues' responses.
This is Ann. I just want to make a general comment. It's not specific to one specific question, but a lot of the questions pertain to, how are we cutting, what kinds of things are we losing? And I just want to talk a little bit about the budget context and the funding context. One of the issues is how much money are we getting from the state, and to some degree, we actually don't even know that yet. So the monies that we received from the federal government to date were basically given to this at the state level. They were given to the state, and then the state took away a capital amount of foundation aid, so that we were had the exact same amount of foundation aid this year as last year, but no more than that. And then come next year, that would mean that we start at a lower point in terms of how much foundation aid that we would have. But the real uncertainty is if the federal government does not pass aid, any bills for aid for states at the federal level, then that which the state does not get could greatly impact school districts all over the state. And that the governor has left the opportunity open, to make those kinds of cuts. And so there's still a certain amount of uncertainty with how much funding will be coming from the state to the school district. So that, I think, is one of the reasons it's a fairly conservative budget.
I would like to add, and I see, Aubryn, you followed up with your question. The budget, as Amanda says all the time, and I served on the finance committee, it is a process that takes all year, and we have been working it on all year. So what we're seeing now is the culmination of 12 months, but also all of these things that have been thrown into it. And like Ann just said, I mean, there are changes that could be coming. So when you ask specifically about distance learning and what's taken into account with the budget, I believe that the money is there. It's more of using the people that we've hired, and what we're talking about is just using the amazing team that we have to rethink what we're doing. So it's not I don't believe it's really a matter of the budget taking into account the needs. I think it's utilizing the staff and really rethinking what we're doing. And even though these instructional coaching jobs are kind of being shifted, that brain power is still there. And I know that in conversations I've had, particularly with Mary Grover and other people, there's constant thinking and rethinking about how we're going to do this. And as we all know, there is no crystal ball right now. This is all really unprecedented. So to say there's a plan for this and a plan for this and this is what we're doing is absolutely impossible. But the money's there and the people are there. It's just utilizing what we have to rethink this, and it's changing all the time.
A question about the instructional positions that will be lost, or cuts to TAs and administration positions. Does any board member want to speak to that?
I can add some additional insight if you wish, prior to a board member speaking, if that's okay, Sean. In the budget that we're putting forth for our community, to our community to vote on, this particular budget, frankly, there's increases to teacher FTE. As we do every year, we have looked at the needs of the school district and we've reallocated funding. Yeah, there are a couple of administrative positions, one that has been open that we will not fill, that will result in a cut to an administrative role. And I foresee us as administrative openings, as we have additional openings, that we're going to look very hard at any of those, just like with any other FTE. In this budget that we're proposing, there are no quote unquote cuts to TA positions. The shifts that you may or may not see in a budget line are a result of the changing and evolving nature of the IEPs and the needs of our young people. This is a conversation we've been having for a couple of years. So as far as this board, this administration putting forth a proposal to eliminate positions, that is not a part of this budget. Nor is it, is our proposal including some eliminations of from teacher FTE as well. Again, you're going to see we're looking to expand our support for a heterogeneous math program at the middle school level. We're looking to add some support for elementary art and music as well. So at this moment in time, and again, every budget is an indication of a moment in time. We see ourselves in some areas growing and in some areas finding some efficiencies. So just to clear that up, because I've been hearing that the last couple of days too, that we're cutting in particular areas. That's just not the case. And as we said a few months ago, and we continue to say, we're going to be looking at every single position as they come open to see if we can find an efficiency there. But that's not so much of a cut. That's just more of an evaluation and potentially a reallocation at this moment.
I'd like to follow up on a couple of things that people have been talking about. Erin was responding to Auburn's question, and one of Auburn's questions suggested that we were eliminating the master educators for inclusion, which we're not. We are sending most of our instructional coaches, where we had one in every building, back to the classroom. But those people will be in the classroom, but also participating in professional learning communities as all our teachers do. And they will be providing their expertise and the brain power that Erin talked about within the buildings and in collaboration with their colleagues. And additionally, the master educators for inclusion, who are still in their roles, they will be providing professional development. And there's going to be professional development this summer and throughout the year, and in various configurations. And one of the silver linings of this distance learning challenge that I've heard from a lot of teachers is it has really energized collaboration among teachers. They needed to, because everybody was new to the distance learning. And so they really needed to work with each other to figure out how to do it well. And I've talked to a lot of teachers who have been energized by that. And I see moving forward that our professional learning communities and the PD that we do have will be filled with people who are really excited and, in a way, desperate to work with one another and learn from one another.
There's another comment about discussion about not being able to see shifting lines in the budget, and it may be helpful to voters to understand what is happening to add information if it isn't clear to the line item. We agree, we try to make it as clear as possible. There will be a 4-page mailer. Amanda, if I'm not mistaken, that'll be going home to all voters that will give additional information about our budget this year. And we actively encourage folks, realizing that time is difficult, family is difficult. We have very limited resources. And as already stated by Aaron, that this is a year-long budgeting process. And so we have finance committees at least once a month in which we try to go in pretty significant detail. There's also minutes, and we try to do regular board updates about what the budget includes. And so if you go back and look at our previous board meetings, you will see numerous conversations about how we came to this final budget. Again, it requires a lot of time and attention, and for that I will apologize in advance, but I just want to make sure folks know that we've been working on this for quite some time. Amanda, would you add anything?
No, I think, you know, a lot of the minutes of the Finance Committee are really helpful. I agree with you. I think if you need further information, a lot of times the way the Finance Committee is designed is that we actually have the group or the budget developer, the director, the principal, who's sort of managing that department or that building come right on in and do a really in-depth presentation. Those are all cataloged in board docs for you as well. And again, I can't stress enough. I noticed there, like, we'll use the example of sort of a line item like the teaching assistant line item in K through 6. Dr. Brown's right. A lot of this is movement of funds. So, for example, salary codes, oftentimes they might include something like a retirement incentive that actually should have been placed in another line item. A lot of the budget development is as much cleanup as it is sort of ensuring that we're funding everything properly. So that TA line that you're seeing there, that is not people. That's actually a recode of a retirement incentive that was moved to another area. What we can do, in the interim, obviously the budget development document is online. We have the budget mailer going out, but based on this conversation this evening and these questions that are coming through, we typically and have in years past done a FAQ or response to questions that's on the budget development area of the website, which has links to all the presentations thus far. We will always continue to try to enhance our communication as much as possible. If you have any questions at any time, that Let's Talk portal is always available to you as well. So you don't have to just wait for a budget hearing like this. You can always send us questions and we'll be able to get it either to the right person or to our department here in the business office, and we can answer that for you.
There was also a question here regarding our master educators and will they be pushing any teachers out of current positions? Bob, Dr. Brown, Amanda, anyone want to speak to that?
We don't anticipate any layoffs. We have a significant amount of turnover each year. That's normal. And so we see folks who'll be moving back into a classroom, going into some of those open positions, and frankly, at a school of their wishes. We've gone through this transition before, and the experiences of being an instructional coach always add value back into a building when they re-enter the classroom.
We regularly have a running competition with Dr. Brown, who's from Charlottesville, Virginia, about which is the best college town in America. Ithaca often ranks #1 and Charlottesville #2. We can talk about that later. And I make mention of that as a college town, we have a very typical phenomenon that happens, which is about 40% of the population has not lived here 4 years prior. So we have significant transition that takes place in our community that both includes employment transition as well as folks who move in and who are participating and re-engaging in our community as well. And so while there's no doubt a long-standing significant population who have been here for a lifetime, Rob Ainsley would be a great example of that. There's also a large population of folks who are relatively new to our community. And so I think that's important for us to realize that we do expect some transition. And at this point in time, we're not expecting any involuntary cuts to positions.
Sean, if I could, I would like
Please.
to, I'd like to speak to some of the other questions I'm seeing on the Zoom group chat. There's a lengthy posting by Rebecca Brenner pointing out a lot of the close.
Pat, you are muted.
Sorry, I thought I was unmuted. I wanted to address some of the questions in the chat. I'm looking at Rebecca Brenner's question about why there's an increase in the tax levy and there should be a tax reduction. Very simply, there will be a tax reduction in the tax rate because of the expanding economy, the expanding assessment pool. If your home has not been reassessed by the county, you will, under this budget, see a decline in your tax rate for the 5th year in a row. We are limited by the state of New York tax cap, as we have been for the last 8 to 9 years, to keep below a certain rate, a certain increase in the levy. That is what this budget does. If we wanted to override that and increase taxes more, we would need a 60% majority. The decision was made, as it has been made every year but once since the tax cap was put in, not to override this. And this, we are, as other people have mentioned, to some extent flying blind with this budget. Governor Cuomo put off the budget vote and board elections from mid-May to June 9th. During that time period, he has not announced what cuts he will be imposing, in addition to not announcing what state aid, foundation aid will be next year. He has reserved the right to reduce the state contribution quarterly throughout the next year because of the state budget condition. Ithaca is actually in a better position than any of the surrounding districts because only about 24% of our budget comes from state funds. All of the surrounding districts have the state picking up, 70 to 90% of their total costs. So although Ithaca pays a higher share, the taxpayers, if they pay a much higher share, that's actually going to shield us from a lot of the extremely devastating cuts that are going to happen to smaller districts throughout the state, ironically putting us in a good position. This is a budget. What this budget says is that we cannot spend any more than this. The levy increase is to cover the raises to our teachers that were voted on last year in a 6-year contract. Our teachers are getting very, very good raises, the most substantial raises they've gotten in many years, and they deserve that. And this is something that I have been particularly concerned with, that we preserve jobs. We are not anticipating layoffs. I don't know if any of our surrounding districts can say that, and that is Dr. Brown's job and the job of the central administration to make that happen. And they are really, really good at their jobs. They are some of the best in the state and the best in the country. And they know this budget through and through, and they know the needs of the district, and they're looking at people and preserving jobs. A lot of people have lost their jobs. Others will. We don't want teachers to lose their jobs. Thank you.
This is, and I just want to make a comment, kind of pick up a little bit on what Pat's saying is, a lot of what this time with COVID-19, it's had a real rethinking of what education, how do you teach? It's turned a lot of things upside down, and people are really having to invent as they go and innovate as they go, coordinate, collaborate. And so a lot of the questions have to do with, cost of administration. It is because of having a really excellent administrative team that we're able to manage this crisis effectively. And when you have an excellent administrative team, like the one that we have in place, it makes everybody's jobs easier for the educators who are in the classroom or online working with kids, and for families. And for the children. So I think it's important to realize that in actual fact, our administrative costs, while they stick out and you're like, oh my goodness, look at those administrative costs, they're really, really valuable. If you didn't have those people working of trying to figure out these thorny problems and coordinating these things, it would be much, much more difficult for everybody. So just my thoughts there.
Look, here's the reality. We know that we have to pay teachers more. As someone who works in teacher education and tries to recruit, as I said in yesterday's forum, I spend most of my time trying to recruit Ithaca College students to join the teaching profession. Very much aware that our teachers are underserved and underpaid, and that is a national issue. And when you go to other states, it's even far more depressing than what you find in New York State. We know that we have additional work to do within the Ithaca City School District. I was very pleased by some of the innovative ways in which we structured this most recent 6-year contract, trying to raise the bottom line of teacher pay while also trying to have increased teacher pay across the board. 4.5% raises coming next year, 4% raises coming after that. That took a lot of collaboration and innovation. So to members of the ITA, to Bob Van Kuren, to the negotiating team, that was very well done. That also means that we have to have different conversations. So if we're not trying to cut any jobs, and we have numbers of raises across some of our unions, that means it's going to be increased pay, particularly as health insurance premiums increase for us as well. I get that there's a lot of focus on Dr. Brown's salary in particular, and I understand as a public official that that's going to take place, and he understands that as well. One of the key data lines that we focus on that our complete whole administration cost is just over 3% of a $139 million budget. So if we would never recommend this, if we were to get rid of all of our administrators, it would be illegal because you need building principals, you need folks running the school district. That would not solve the budget shortfall we have. Yes, we are looking at administration efficiencies. I want to be real with folks, that will continue to take place, but focusing solely on one position and one raise is not going to solve the complex issues that we have of making sure that all of our employees are paid a living wage and trying to figure out how best to move the district forward. We continue to engage the community in collaboration about how to be innovative to make that happen, and we will continue to do so. For folks who have asked me for additional information, please feel free to email me at any point in time, sean.bradwell@icsd.k12.ny.us, and I'd be happy to share with you some of the benchmarking information that we've done, not just around our administrator pay, but also our teacher pay, which we know that we have to continue to increase, and we will continue to do so. The same thing goes for our teachers' aides, our employment association, our bus drivers. We're aware we find ourselves in some difficult situations, and I felt compelled to say that.
I would just like to add that I spent 25 years teaching in Ithaca City School District, and I often had questions, and I raised these questions when I first ran for the board 5 years ago, about what administrators did, what their value was that justified their salaries. Since I came on the board, I have gotten a very, very different perspective. I recognize how incredibly complex our district is, and very much more complex in many ways than the surrounding districts. I also believe that that the team that we have now is, as other folks on the board have said, is outstanding. And as you know, Pat said, some of the best people in the state, in the country, and there have been various organizations that have recognized that. So I can't imagine that we could make the progress that we have made, and I believe we'll continue to make, or as someone else pointed out, that we would have done as well as we have, certainly not perfectly, but as well as we have done in this crisis if we didn't have the team that we do.
Nicole LaFaith here. I would also add to the conversation that I think it's important for all of us to remember that we have 8, as we think about Dr. Brown's salary, I feel like that's a theme throughout this thread. I think it's important to highlight that we have 8 elementary schools as well as 3 middle schools and 2 high schools. So as we compare ourselves to other surrounding areas such as Teaburg or Dryden, we have to think about how many students we're actually serving and the work that goes into creating these community schools that this community seems to want to preserve. So I think when we're thinking about numbers and what they mean and what folks do, I think it's really important to think about all the students and buildings that we're also serving.
Dr. Bradwell, may I add some
Absolutely.
thoughts here? I mean, this is a budget hearing, and I'm hoping that my comments are coming more from a 10-year community member, which is the intent. I came to this community to be a community member. And you know, when driving across the mountains on Interstate 81 10 years ago, I was reading the editorial in the paper speaking to the superintendent's salary then. And I realized then, as I was leaving a community, and I grew up with a mother, God rest her soul, who for 44 years, while she was in a classroom making $12,000 a year, she complained about administrative salaries. So, and she would say that, she would yell at me and my brother because we had no clue what she was talking about. So we would always agree. So having heard that all my life, I've been into the conversations about administrative salaries. After her retirement, she shifted her conversations to thinking more about community building. And it wasn't so much about administrative salaries, it was much more about how do we use these millions of dollars to meet the needs of our learners, which was a significant shift for her, and one that I also had to make at the same time, and not focusing on admin salaries. And when driving across that mountain in 2010, reading the editorial in the paper, was speaking to an administrative salary. I think it was at the time $175,000. It was way, way too much. And all the things that the administrator was not going to do in this community. And I remember reading it, and I called my mom. I was like, yo, this community is talking about administrative salaries again. And she said, well, go on and read the rest of the article. And when I did read the rest of the article, it spoke to how this administrator was paid far too much, and that there was no way that an administrator could be a part of closing achievement gaps, increasing graduation rates, bringing some culture, a common approach to a vision and mission, all these things we wouldn't do. And then it went on to say, and you're giving them the money because it's Black. It helped shift my thinking that day when my mama said, and that's why you go to build community, not to make money and not to be an administrator. And I think what we've done over 10 years is shift the conversation. And you referred to how there's been so much transition in our community, and I see this time loop. We're back to a conversation about administrator salaries again. And we can go over there and talk about that. You know, the superintendent here is paid competitively and fairly. When you look at small city school districts and school districts in the Rochester area and Syracuse area, the superintendent here is probably in the middle of the pack. One could even argue that probably on the lower end of the scale, but that's not what people want to hear. They don't want to hear that, you know, the longest serving superintendent in the region at 10 years, while some school districts have changed over 3 or 4 times in that 10 years, and to the tune of about $70,000 searches each time, and contracts with a lot of incentives to get them to come, including moving costs. So in some cases, and you know, I'm thinking about a particular school district that's paying 2 superintendents at the same time. So, you know, folks don't really care or want to talk about that. What I'm hoping we do as a community, as we're facing an unprecedented, not just a challenge, but in some ways a catastrophe when it comes to what needs to shift quickly as far as teaching and learning, and what needs to happen as far as navigating these significant budget challenges that we're going to be facing soon is to elevate the conversation beyond a 2.75% increase for an administrator, or even a 4.5% increase for teachers, to how we going to use the $130+ million we have in our budget to meet the needs of learners in a new situation, to meet the needs of our learners who are going to have social emotional health needs that we haven't yet to see before, who are going to have to learn in a digital environment and a bricks and mortar environment together at the same time. That's the conversation I'm hoping as community members we can lead, more so than the $12,000 over 2 years that we're giving to an administrator that we said we were paying way too much 11 years ago, and that we were only paying because he was Black. If we're going to have that conversation, let's just keep that in the chat room or on social media, and I can engage with that too. But I'm much more excited, and quite frankly, I'm yearning the other conversation about how we're going to use the money that we're asking our community to approve, $130+ million, to provide the best facilities in New York State, to provide the best instructional program in New York State, to support these amazing educators we've asked over the last 2.5 months to rethink their entire instructional delivery process, and they've done it. That's the conversation I'm excited about, and I'm looking forward to as a community member and as an administrator who's been working 14 hours a day trying to meet the needs of our learners and doing it with a smile. So I just wanted to add a little commentary, and no way was this to defend a salary of an administrator. No way is it even to highlight or take the attention away from the salaries of an administrator, because we look at every line item. But I am hoping to elevate a conversation in my community, one in which I've committed my life to, and the one in which I'm raising my children in. And if this conversation is going to divulge to a conversation about 2.75 increases from year to year for administrator, then I'm suggesting that we're having the wrong conversation.
Hello, everyone. This is Eldred. I just want to add some specific information to address these questions about Dr. Brown's salary. I understand that what he just said and others have said is taking a high road, but I think it is fair for people to investigate history who haven't been here and haven't been a part of this process. So let me take you all back a ways. My colleagues on the board who were part of Dr. Brown's hiring process know these details. For those of you relatively new to community, of course you don't. All I ask is that when you engage with me about his salary or anybody else's salary or any issue, in fact, just be respectful. I have no obligation to actually respond to you if you're disrespectful. I hope you understand that. It's actually not a requirement. When we went to Charlottesville, Virginia to pluck Dr. Brown from his hometown, the salary that we gave him was, I think we made it $1 more than the previous superintendent's salary, if I remember. At the time, $175,000 was well below then the market rate for similarly situated districts, given our budget and given our number of students. Dr. Brown had not had previous superintendent experience, so it made sense at least to try to start him in that position. You may also recall that when he came in 2011, the country was in the midst of its last financial disaster caused by adults. It had nothing to do with kids. He and his administration at that time did voluntarily forego raises. I believe the number of years was 5, if I'm not mistaken. 5 years for an excellent administrator. You may not know this as well. Ithaca City School District has produced 7 superintendents around the state. And the number of African Americans we push into leadership positions doubled the rate of African American superintendents in the state. So our superintendent of the year went several years without taking a raise then. Yes, there was a significant bump in his salary during the renegotiation precisely because he and his administrators had decided to forego significant salary increases. I think it's Sophia. Hi, Sophia. Good to see you involved. Good to see you engaged. Deirdre, I know you and I have been going back and forth about this salary issue for a while. Hopefully what I'm saying puts it to rest. If not, everyone here has communicated we're happy to converse about this more in a respectful manner. So yes, that salary increase was significant. The salary increase that was significant hasn't changed materially since then. We got from 175 roughly 230. The 2.57 increases are just contractual increases. I don't want to say that offhandedly as if it doesn't matter, but those are contractual increases in the same way that every other group has received contractual increases. Everyone that is employed by this district, with the exception of very few people, is part of a bargaining unit. As we bargain, things change. I want to address one more thing specifically, and I really hope this gets put to rest because it's unfair and it's almost, it borders on something I'm not willing to say yet, but we'll see how this shakes out. Comparing Dr. Brown's salary and situation to the presidents of Ithaca College and Cornell University is ridiculous. These people make up to 5 times as much as we're paying him. They don't have the cost of living concerns that he has at all. Their housing is taken care of by the university. Their transportation is taken care of the university. And even those cuts that you all are remarking have been backloaded to the end of those contracts, in the same way that rent, in the same way that mortgages have been backloaded to the end of those contractual agreements for individuals who can't afford to make those payments. So I will end by saying this. Do you really want to roll the dice in a state where 200 superintendent positions are open and hope that we can find somebody who can move us in the way that our current superintendent has moved us? Not just academically, but culturally, socially. Ithaca is not the place it was when he decided to come here. I'm not going to say against his mother's wishes, but I know she was concerned about how this would work out. Again, I know, Deirdre, you know how to reach me. Sophia, you and I have exchanged information before. Rebecca, anyone who wants to talk about this. The numbers we ran were obviously not for Manhattan and Westchester. That would be ridiculous. The same for Long Island or someplace like Scarsdale. The figures we ran were for Rochester, were for Syracuse, were for Poughkeepsie, were for similarly situated small city school districts. And in that regard, Dr. Brown's salary is, from my personal perspective, insulting. And I will leave it at that. Thank you.
We have a question. I'm going to change the conversation. This is a budget hearing. We were scheduled for an hour. We'll go a few minutes longer. We know folks have questions. One is to explain the line items for athletics. I'll put that to Amanda or Bob. Is there some additional information that we want to add about the line item about athletics?
Hi, everyone. I'm sorry. I'm trying to do multiple things here by communicating in the chat. And so, Sean, I'm so sorry. If you don't mind, you were asking about the athletics budget?
Yes. And it just says the line items for athletics and where we find ourselves.
Yep.
I'm pulling it up as well.
You got it. Absolutely. And sometimes I like to also go into the system as well. Okay, so line items for athletics. So the instructional salaries are the athletic director. There's also a teacher on special assignment that supports all the student athletes at the high school in terms of the double NCAA requirements and things like that. Runs sort of study halls, runs the coaches council, all of that. That's also where the coaches' salaries are oftentimes in terms of that, because we have teachers in our district that serve as coaches. The non-instructional salaries oftentimes are non-certified teachers that are doing the coaching, as well as a lot of the referees that we have to pay, and any support staff that would occur, that's needed for the athletic department, like clerical. Equipment obviously is what it is. The equipment piece, what happened this year was that there's a lot of equipment that we used to purchase out of the facilities department lines that we actually moved now into athletics because we wanted that to be managed within athletics. We used to often look at the equipment from a district-wide level in terms of the facilities department, but they have so many things to also manage, especially with the capital projects. So we just want to make sure that that was actually under Ms. Little's purview and be able to manage that in a better way. the contractual services, I think I gave a definition of that in the chat. So that's all the things that, you know, support the operations of the district that usually are specialized, that we have to actually contract out for, that we actually can't do it with our own staff. Supplies and materials, you know, that's I think pretty self-explanatory. And then BOSI services, there's actually a fee to be a part of the network or the stack that we're in. So those are the line items for you.
Thank you. Any other
If I could,
questions?
I wanted to go address Auburn's question earlier that spoke to the delivery of the delivery of homework. Lily or Dr. Brown, would you be able to talk to that schedule in terms of the Wednesday, Thursday schedule? Is schoolwork being delivered that day of the week because of a shortage of buses or a shortage of bus drivers that are able or want to work during the pandemic?
Yes, I'll direct that to Bob first, because I know Bob was directly dealing with that particular situation. Bob?
Sure. Thanks, Dr. Brown. When the closure first hit, request was put out to our drivers to seek volunteers who were willing to come in, and you know, you have to remember the conditions we were working under. A lot wasn't specifically known about the disease, so some of our drivers clearly are in the higher age range. Some of them have underlying health conditions, and we're choosing at that time not to become part of the group that would deliver food and instructional materials. Once we created that pod of drivers, the health department, local health department, suggested that the pod of drivers delivering food and the pod of food service helpers that were making the food not change, so that the same people worked on those details every day. And that's what we followed. It was best practices and protocol. And what we learned as we grew in this process is that we needed to shift some of the delivery of instructional materials to later in the week, so that that pod of bus drivers had the opportunity to deliver over the course of 3 days, instead of trying to deliver it all on one day. And that's worked out really well, I think. So thanks.
Thanks.
Are there any additional questions? If not, one of the closing things that I would like to say is to go back to a comment that Rebecca Brenner asked about whether or not we should have a tax reduction in this climate. And it's something that we've had considerable conversation about as a board all year long. Again, I work at Ithaca College, and I know my colleagues at Cornell and friends and family who work for the city have all experienced layoffs and furloughs. They are all going to be reducing their workforce for the upcoming school year, the upcoming fiscal year pretty significantly. And folks on the call, my apologies, may have been experiencing that already. We do not find ourselves in that position right now as a school district. That's pretty unique. If you look across the state, nearly every school district that I'm aware of is cutting significant positions. And so we understand that it is difficult to be thinking about a tax levy increase at this time. But as my colleague Pat Wasloo said, if your assessment has not gone up, in reality, your taxes will go down. The tax rate will decrease for the 5th year in a row. And that is to the sound fiscal management that ICSD has been undertaking for well over a decade, that folks have been quite good with trying to manage our finances while still understanding the significant concerns that we have around salary and equitable pay. So we're working towards that. Another item real quick that would be important to say, there's a lot of things that need to be decided by the voters. The board cannot tell people how to vote. We can give you information. It appears that there most likely would not be time for a second vote to happen this election cycle. That would mean that should this budget not be approved by the voters, the district would be forced to go to a contingency budget. And that means it'd be the same budget as we had last year, or in essence, a $4.8 million reduction to what we currently have proposed. And that is before we discuss any other reductions in state aid and or any federal stimulus money that would be a one-time addition to our budget. So we have some significant choices to make as a community. We believe that we put forward a budget, while again, absolutely not perfect, tries to protect the programming for young folks and tries to do so in a way that's equitable. And so I'm greatly appreciative to live in a community where folks are invested. I know that Auburn had their budget hearing last evening and no one called in. That's not the community that we live in. We have a much more active, involved, and informed community. And that's one of the reasons why I've been serving for a long period of time. So thank you for your questions. Thank you for pushing us. Thank you for hard-hitting questions. If you did not get your question answered in this forum, you can definitely reach out to board members at any point in time. You can reach out to Amanda Verba, to Dr. Brown. There is the Let's Talk portal on the ICSD website. We try to be as communicative as we can with folks who may not be able to give you answers immediately, but we're always open for the conversation. And as I said last night in the forum, we may not always agree, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't dialogue. So that's my closing words.
Sean, before we sign off, there are a couple of questions in the chat. When will the ballots be sent out, and where can people find the recording? So I wonder if we could answer
the recording
those.
I can speak to. Tricia, our board clerk, uploads all recorded videos to the Ithaca City School District YouTube channel. And so as soon as Zoom will provide us a transcript, which then goes through and tries to be corrected, it will get uploaded as soon as possible. And I know this will take heightened status given the fact that budgets have to be mailed before June 9th. They have to be received into the board building by June 9th at 5 p.m. You can hand deliver them as long as you take necessary precautions to protect the health of folks in the board building. And if you're going to use them by mail, please be mindful of the time that it will take our post office to get it to the board building. Amanda, in regards to the ballots being mailed, I don't know if you have information about that, or Dr. Brown. I know Tricia's on the call as well.
Right, so we have some wonderful people at the board building working on all of this. Tricia, our district clerk, is sort of the lead member of the team. Emily Arm Tracy has been fantastic. Casey Bangs, Terry Nunez, Angela Jordan. So we thank them all for working on all of this. I think as we stated last week, we're right on our timeline. So we had been expecting to get everything printed sort of the past 2 days, starting like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And so everything's going into the mail via mailboxes. It was today and tomorrow. So you should be getting them very soon. And we're actually starting to staff the board building tomorrow from 9 a.m. until 5 p.m. There's a doorbell at the front door that we have placed there, Sean, to your point around making sure that we're keeping safe. What we'll be doing is controlling any traffic. If you do deliver your ballot to the district office, a staff person, if you ring that doorbell, will meet you at the door. Please remember a few tips. There is one ballot per voter, right? So your household will be receiving, if you have more than one voter, as many ballots as you have voters in your household that are registered. If you have registered after the deadline and you did not get the mailing tomorrow or the next day, most likely it's coming in on Monday or Tuesday because we will get that new list of voters from the Board of Elections and include those in the next mailing if folks registered later than was already on the books. If you receive your ballot, we ask that you fill it out either with, I think they recommend like a felt tip marker, but a pen will be fine. Please be sure to complete the full oval. You remember back to the days of when we took those standardized tests, it's sort of like that. And so we want to make sure that the machines can read those. Remember, these are not being read by people. They are actually being read and fed through the machine. Your ballots will be returned even if you hand deliver them in an individual envelope that you must seal and sign and complete. There's actually required information on there, your name, your address, so that we can actually look at that envelope and compare it to the election books that you would have seen when you walked into the election location that you would have voted in. That envelope then gets sorted and put over into a bin that then someone else separates the ballot out from the envelope. The ballot and the envelopes are not kept together. So all ballots are anonymous. The envelopes go so that we can track the voters and compare those signatures, but the ballots go separately. Remember that there are two propositions on those ballots, right? There's the first proposition, which is the budget. You are essentially giving permission to the Ithaca City School District to spend up to that amount that is listed and levy the taxes there too. That's proposition 1. There's a yes and no for that. Proposition 2 is to spend money out of a reserve account called the Capital Reserve that was established in 2018. It has been funded each year. That money is set aside specifically to purchase buses, sometimes to do capital work on our buildings. We're not doing that this year. It's minimal number of buses and a couple of smaller vans that we need to transport our young people or even now our materials and supplies around the district. That is proposition number 2. There is a yes and no for that proposition. And then there are the folks that are running for the seats on the Board of Education. And there are 3 seats. And so of the candidates that are listed, you can choose 3 people and you would mark your vote next to those names. And so each one of those is independent. The machine will read those independently. So you can vote on each of those elements the way that you like. Please be sure again to fill in those completed ovals so that we have that. Pencil, pen, felt tip marker will all work.
Thank you, Amanda. Appreciate it. Mr. Board President, I don't know if you want to bring us to a close if there's no additional questions.
No, thank you, Amanda, and thank you everyone for your questions and the responses from the exec team and certainly the board members. And there are still folks on the line, but I do believe there was one item that we as the board just wanted to touch base on. Folks can stay on. The budget hearing has ended. We went about an hour and 15 minutes, so that was great input, great questions from the community. But in the Legislative Action Committee meeting on Tuesday, there was an issue that was brought up, and Carrie Burke sent an outline of an issue that has come up. And I guess, Anne, you wanted just to bring it to the attention of folks tonight?
Yes. It's actually a really, like many of the things that we deal with, some of the legislation that gets passed in Albany, when it comes down to the local level, there's sometimes details they just didn't think about when they were legislating. And when people at the local level begin to deal with the technicalities of some of these legislations, they discover flaws. So the proposition that Carrie is suggesting would remedy one of these flaws. The flaw resembles a little bit like a highway where you have 2 highways and you have to get off the highway, go onto a dirt road, and then get onto another highway. So you may have 2 highways, but you've got a dirt road that connects these 2 bodies and slows everything down. So what it is, it's fairly technical, but it has to do with vaccinations and how they're recorded and how they get that information and how much time gets basically wasted doing clerical activities. There is a faster way to do this in which they can use a database and take down all the information they need with batches, and that would make the whole job go a lot faster. However, New York state law prohibits the school districts for utilizing that particular batch download of vaccination data. So what Carrie has proposed, and I don't know if she's on the line, is a way that would would be that we could reach out to our legislators to alter the legislation in such a way that would give school districts the opportunity, the ability to group download vaccination information so that they wouldn't have to take one, they're allowed to do it one child's vaccination records at a time right now. And it literally takes hours and hours, and there's a certain amount of information that, you know, there's just an error possibility when you do it in that way. So it would improve accuracy, it would free up time of our nurses, and we're gonna need that time for our nurses. So that's it in a nutshell. So I don't know if anybody wants to add, I don't know if Erin is still on or if Carrie is on the line. Or
Erin and Carrie is available at this time.
Yeah, Carrie, do you want to add the more technical detail there?
And actually, I think you did a fabulous job representing the concerns and the possibilities that exist with this opportunity. So thank you.
So what we're asking as part of legislative advocacy, we've been discussing our process in terms of how things that we discuss in committee, how they come to the board. So we didn't want to just go out on our own and start advocating for this without asking the rest of the board to weigh in, and to see if we would have your blessing for us to reach out to our assembly person and to our state senators and see if we could maybe get them to attend to this issue in what remains of the current session, which sometimes they actually do get things done in June. So it's not too late.
Well, thanks, Carrie, and thanks, Ann, as always. This is not a regular board meeting. By a consensus, I don't know that we need to have a resolution and all that, but certainly looking at the hours, there's pie charts, Carrie. It's nicely done. I like the visuals and the pie charts, and 17 hours a week in some circumstances that folks are spending just on data is daunting. So obviously their time needs to be spent in other ways. So I would certainly think that you're not looking for a mere letter from the board. You're looking, shall we go and advocate on behalf of our situation in this district and frankly all districts. So from me, certainly I have no problem with that whatsoever.
Okay, great.
Others certainly can weigh in. I mean, thumbs up is great, however we want to respond. But Sean, I think, the board officers are certainly in favor. And unless we hear anyone object in the next few minutes, then Ann, we will let you loose, Ann and others will let you loose on, well, they should be suspecting legislators by now that when they know you all are coming. So.
Okay, great.
Sounds good. And I just would add that we're going to need our nurses doing significant work, not data entry, more than ever.
Data entry.
It seems to be just another example where Ithaca City School District is leading the state. We did it on the healthcare reserve, and this is, it's par for the course. Thanks, Ann, for your leadership on this committee, and I look forward to, well, I can't say I look forward to more long, drawn-out trips to Albany, but if that's what it takes, that's what it takes.
Great.
Yeah,
All
I just want to add, it was a very, very, very sensible proposal that will save time and resources and streamline everything. And let's hope that Albany hears it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the kind of thing where Albany probably doesn't even know the problem exists. It's something that Carrie identified here at the local level. And so I'm sure it must be a problem elsewhere too. So if it would help us, it would help all school districts, I would think.
Let me just echo what Pat and Rob said. Carrie, that had to be one of the best memos I've read in quite some time. It was visual as well as informative. So thank you very much for putting it together. I think it helped us all understand exactly what we're being asked to do. So appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Great. So Carrie, we'll be in touch tomorrow.
Wonderful.
there.
Thanks again. And I really appreciate your support around this effort.
No, outstanding effort, Carrie. Thank you, and thanks, Ann, Eldred, others. That was that little side business that we need to take care of, but important nonetheless. Thanks, Dr. Brown, Amanda, Bob, any of the other executive team that were on the call. Thanks to the building leaders, the budget makers all year round that put this budget together. Our job is done at this point. We've done everything that we have to do. We voted. We've had our budget hearing. As Sean stated very well, keep reaching out to board members if the community has questions. As they're looking at the information that is coming out from the district over the next few days, certainly reach out. We'll try to answer any questions that you may have. And if we can't answer them, we'll go to others that can. So it's been a good evening. I wish everyone a good rest of their evening. And I think, Sean, we're about set, right? I think we're all good. Sean is the keeper of meetings, and so I will thank everyone and have a good evening. And we will see you all soon. We'll see. There's other opportunities for the community to learn about the candidates for the Board of Education. I believe there's another community forum virtually, perhaps I think on Monday it's the Village. I think it's the Village is doing one, correct, Sean? I believe.
6 p.m. Monday.
Okay. And I'm sure there's information on how to connect with that as well. So we'll tune into that, and we'll see folks, I'm sure, next week. Thanks, everybody.
Night.
Good night.